9 legendary car brands are about to die before 2026. And what's killing these automotive giants is happening faster than anyone predicted. Europe's car market is collapsing. June registrations plummeted 4.4%. Profits are vaporizing, and entire communities are losing their livelihoods overnight. Hard-working Americans know the pain when greedy corporations pull the rug out, but in Europe, it's a market apocalypse rewriting the future. Now. What's the secret force nobody saw coming, and which brand will vanish next? The true crisis starts now. June 2025 delivered a shock to the European auto industry. Official EU data showed new car registrations crashing by 4.4% compared to the same month last year. For the first half of 2025, the market slipped another 0.3%, ending any hope that the slump was just a blip. These aren't just small fluctuations. These are numbers that wipe billions off balance sheets and threaten the survival of entire brands. The pain is everywhere. In Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, dealership floors are empty, and unsold cars stack up in storage lots. Despite a minor sales bump in August, the market remains stuck below 2023 levels. Battery electric vehicles grabbed 19% of new registrations in August, up from 17%. But that shift isn't enough to fill the hole left by collapsing demand for traditional cars. Petrol registrations dropped more than 20% year-to-date, diesel even further at 26%. Stellantis, one of Europe's biggest car groups, saw Q2 shipments fall to 1.4 million units, a 6% drop year-on-year. Even the giants can't escape the downturn. Tesla's European sales nosedived 33% in the first half of 2025, losing precious market share. Meanwhile, Chinese brands like BYD are up 311%, but their gains only highlight how badly the old guard is struggling. Across the continent, the numbers tell a single story. The market is shrinking fast. Dealer networks are collapsing, with 47 Emil Frey dealerships and 10 Pendragon locations shuttered in just a few months, cutting thousands of jobs. Factory towns that once thrived on auto industry payrolls now face double-digit budget cuts and layoffs. As sales dry up and profits vanish, the data points to a crisis with no bottom in sight. The scale of the collapse is written in hard numbers: registrations down, profits erased, futures in doubt. In Sochaux, France, the silence at the old Peugeot plant is impossible to ignore. Where thousands once clocked in for steady shifts, the gates now stay locked most days of the week. Stellantis let go of over 4,000 workers here since last summer. The town's mayor has slashed the local budget by 12%, closing the library and shelving repairs for the community pool. A single factory's fate has left an entire town scrambling to keep the lights on. It's the same story in Sunderland, England. Nissan's partial shutdown erased 5,600 jobs overnight, with another 2,100 lost in the supply chain. The city council froze hiring, and £9.7 million in annual tax revenue vanished. Graham Miller, the council leader, called it a municipal emergency, warning, local government income has dropped by more than 10% overnight. In Melfi, Italy, the pain cuts deep. Stellantis is laying off 1,300 people in a town of just 17,000. The mayor's office reports an €8 million hole in the annual budget, forcing cuts to schools and social services. For families who have built their lives around the plant, the future looks grim. One assembly worker, Marco, described it simply: "I gave 22 years to this company. Now they tell me to start over at 48. Where am I supposed to go?" Dealership owners aren't spared. In Germany, the Emil Frey Group shuttered 47 locations, cutting 2,700 jobs. Pendragon in the UK closed 10 more, leaving hundreds out of work. For many, the collapse feels personal. Anna, a longtime customer, stands in front of a shuttered showroom and says, "I grew up with these cars. Now I can't even find someone to service mine. It's like losing a part of home. Behind every statistic is a family, a business, a town left to pick up the pieces. The collapse isn't just measured in lost cars or empty lots. It's measured in lives upended and futures stolen by decisions made far from the factory floor. DS, Lancia, and Infiniti once stood for European flair, innovation, and luxury. Today, these names are fading into shadows. DS, launched with fanfare as Citroën's avant-garde spin-off, now clings to life almost entirely within France. Over 80% of its sales come from the domestic market, and outside its home turf, the brand has become a footnote. Annual registrations across the rest of Europe have dropped below 5,000. Most DS showrooms have shuttered, with the few survivors relegated to corners of larger Citroën dealerships. Ambitious plans for electric-only models have been quietly shelved, with Stellantis pulling the plug on new investments until at least 2026. Lancia's story is even more haunting. Once a symbol of Italian engineering, the brand now exists only in Italy, selling a single model, the Ypsilon. No exports, no expansion, no future product launches. The dealer network has collapsed to a fraction of its former size, barely enough to service the dwindling fleet. Annual registrations have fallen below 50,000, a number that would have been unthinkable even a decade ago. There are no credible plans for a European comeback, and the last remaining factory lines have been consolidated into a single Stellantis plant. Infiniti, Nissan's luxury badge, has simply vanished. Dealer contracts were terminated years ago, and any hope of a European return was dashed when its EV project for the region was cancelled. As of late 2025, Infiniti has no active dealers, no new registrations, and no presence in any European market. The brand's disappearance is so complete that even devoted owners struggle to find parts or service. For many, these brands were more than just cars, they were part of family history. One DS owner in Lyon put it this way: "My father drove a DS. I learned to drive in one. Now the badge means nothing outside France. It's like watching your family's legacy disappear. What's left is a landscape of empty showrooms and broken promises. The heritage that once shaped European roads is now confined to memories and museum pieces, erased by years of corporate neglect and the relentless pressure of a market that no longer forgives hesitation." Jaguar's European dealers once stretched from Lisbon to Warsaw, with more than 600 showrooms stocked with British steel and leather. Now, the cull is underway. By the end of 2025, Jaguar's network will shrink to just 50 locations across all of Europe, stripped down to a skeleton crew. Most dealers are being told to survive for up to 18 months with nothing but used cars and a trickle of service work while the company gambles everything on a luxury electric vehicle relaunch. For hundreds of small business owners, the letter from Jaguar's headquarters landed like a punch. The partnership is over, the cars aren't coming, and the future is up for grabs. Maserati's fate is just as grim. Once the pride of Modena, the brand's dealer network is unraveling as volumes collapse. Maserati's annual registrations across Europe have fallen below 8,000 cars, a number that can't support a wide dealer base or the jobs that depend on it. Showrooms that once hosted champagne launches now sit empty, their owners forced to pivot to other brands or close entirely. One industry analyst summed it up: "Dealers are the canary in the coal mine. When they're left with nothing to sell, the brand is already gone. Nobody just hasn't written the obituary yet." The impact ripples outward. Local mechanics lose contracts, parts suppliers see orders dry up, and family-run service garages watch decades of loyalty turn worthless overnight. The planned cuts aren't just numbers, they're a demolition of the middle class that built Europe's car culture. In the words of a German dealer principal, "We invested our lives in this badge. Now, we're being tossed aside. The people in London or Turin don't care. They're just cutting costs. It's us who pay the price." These aren't isolated stories. Across the continent, the dealer collapse is accelerating. The old promise of partnership between car makers and communities has been replaced by a cold retreat, leaving small businesses stranded as the market implodes. For every legendary badge that fades from the showroom, another local dream is extinguished. Alfa Romeo's badge once meant speed, passion, and Italian style. Now, in cities like Milan, the showrooms stand empty for weeks at a time. Dealers whisper about an 18-month stretch without a single new model to sell. Some months, not a single Alfa leaves the lot. The few that do are snapped up by collectors, not families or commuters. For loyal buyers, it's a bitter end. One longtime owner, Paolo, says, "My father bought his first Alfa in 1972. I've had 5. Now, the dealer tells me to wait until next year. Maybe. I don't even know if they'll still be here." Nissan's European story is just as bleak. The company slashed its model lineup, leaving only a handful of cars for sale. In some countries, dealerships report single-digit sales for entire quarters. The once busy Nissan centers in Spain and Germany now focus on used cars and repairs, with new inventory arriving so rarely that staff joke about taking pictures when it happens. The parent company in Japan has stopped sending new investments, and rumors swirl that the European division will soon be a shell, rebadging Chinese imports just to survive. Chrysler is already a ghost. In 2024, only 187 new Chryslers were registered across all of Europe, less than some luxury brands sell in a week. The last Chrysler showroom in Belgium closed its doors in March 2025, leaving a handful of cars stranded on the lot. For owners, finding parts or service is nearly impossible. One frustrated customer in Antwerp summed it up. "My mechanic laughed when I asked about a warranty. He told me, 'You're on your own now.'" Opel, once a household name from Lisbon to Warsaw, is fading fast. Sales have fallen by double digits every quarter, and the dealer network is shrinking by the month. The Corsa and Astra, longtime staples of European roads, are now outsold by Chinese newcomers. Some Opel dealers have gone 18 months without a major new launch, surviving on hope and used car trade-ins. For many, the writing is on the wall. The volume that once kept these brands alive has vanished. What's left is a slow drift toward the same oblivion already claimed by others. One empty showroom, one silent production line at a time. Euro 7 isn't just another emissions rule, it's a technical gauntlet that every car maker in Europe now has to run. For the first time, the law doesn't stop at the tailpipe. It digs into every corner of the car, setting hard limits on what comes off the brakes, what wears off the tires, and how long an electric battery can last before it's considered worn out. The days when an automaker could tweak an engine and call it a day are gone. Now, every vehicle sold after the Euro 7 deadline must prove, in lab tests and on the road, that it releases fewer microparticles from its brakes and tires than ever before. That means expensive new brake materials, re-engineered tire compounds, and sensors that track every bit of wear in real time. But the real headache is the battery. Euro 7 forces electric vehicles to guarantee battery durability for years. No more rapid range loss or silent degradation. Batteries must retain a minimum percentage of their original capacity, sometimes up to 80% even after years of use. If a battery drops below that, the car fails compliance. This isn't just a problem for startups. Even legacy brands must redesign battery packs, overhaul cooling systems, and invest in better software to monitor health. For small volume brands, the cost and complexity can be overwhelming. They can't just buy off-the-shelf solutions. Every battery, every sensor, every line of code must meet the new standards. On top of that, Euro 7 requires every new car to carry an onboard monitoring system. These digital watchdogs don't just check the engine, they track emissions from every system all the time. If something slips out of spec, the car logs it and reports it during inspection. This means more electronics, more development, and more headaches for engineers trying to squeeze these systems into already tight budgets. The technical demands don't stop at the factory gate. Cars must stay compliant for years, not just when they're new. That means tougher warranties, stricter quality controls, and a new reality for every service garage in Europe. For the big brands, spreading these costs across millions of vehicles is painful but possible. For brands on the edge, those selling a few thousand cars a year, these mandates are a wall they may never climb. The engineering challenge is relentless, and for some, it's the last straw. Next comes the price tag. How these technical hurdles turn into a financial death sentence for Europe's weakest car makers. Euro 7 compliance isn't just a technical headache, it's a financial wrecking ball, especially for the smaller brands already running on fumes. The cost to bring a single car up to code now ranges from 357 to 929 euros per vehicle, depending on the engine. For a company selling 250,000 cars a year, that's a tough pill to swallow. But for brands barely clearing 30,000 units, it's a death sentence. Every brake sensor, every tire compound, every new battery guarantee, these aren't spread across millions of cars. They hit each unit like a sledgehammer. Take the numbers apart, and the picture gets even uglier. A brand like DS or Lancia, selling under 50,000 cars annually, faces compliance costs that can wipe out any hope of profit. The math is brutal. Fixed costs for engineering and testing don't shrink just because you build fewer cars. Instead, they get divided by a smaller and smaller number, driving the per-unit cost sky high. That's why the survival model for these brands looks so bleak. The basic formula is simple. If your fixed costs are 50 million euros and your per-car cost is 800 euros, you need to sell over 62,500 cars just to break even, before you even talk about making a profit. Most of these brands aren't even close. Larger automakers can cushion the blow by spreading costs across a dozen models and millions of units. For the little guys, there's nowhere to hide. They can't just pass the cost to customers, raise sticker prices, and buyers bolt for cheaper, more reliable options from China or Korea. Try to absorb the hit, and the cash runs out before the year is over. That's the liquidity cliff everyone in the boardroom fears. When the cash dries up, the banks call in their loans, and the brand's last hope is a fire sale, or total shutdown. Even the so-called survivors are on thin ice. Stellantis, for example, is burning through 2 to 3 billion euros in free cash flow every 6 months, with debt maturities peaking before the end of 2026. If shipment declines keep up and restructuring charges keep piling on, their liquidity runway could vanish in less than a year. Credit rating agencies have already slapped them with a negative outlook, and bond spreads are widening. The clock is ticking, and every new regulation tightens the noose. This isn't just about emissions or engineering, it's about math that doesn't add up. For the brands on the edge, every new Euro 7 rule is another nail in the coffin. The cost shock isn't theoretical, it's written in red ink on the balance sheets, and for most, there's no way back. Chinese automakers are rewriting the rules of the European car market, and the numbers are impossible to ignore. BYD, once an unfamiliar name outside China, has exploded onto the scene with a staggering 311% surge in European sales this year. In just 12 months, their market share has leapt from obscurity to a foothold that rattles every boardroom from Paris to Munich. MG, now owned by SAIC, has overtaken Tesla in registrations, signaling a seismic shift in consumer loyalty. Together, Chinese brands now claim more than 11% of Europe's electric vehicle market, up from barely 4% 2 years ago. At this pace, analysts project they'll control a quarter of all electric vehicle sales in Europe by 2026. The growth isn't just fast, it's targeted. BYD and its rivals are flooding the market with models that undercut European prices by up to 35%, offering features that used to be exclusive to luxury badges. In the first half of 2025, BYD alone registered over 42,000 new vehicles across the continent, up from just 10,200 the previous year. MG's European sales have climbed past 80,000, while legacy brands like Opel and Citroën struggle to keep their heads above water. The old guard is losing ground at every price point, from city hatchbacks to family SUVs. This isn't a gradual erosion, it's a market share land grab. For every 100 new electric vehicles sold in Europe, more than 11 now carry a Chinese badge. The speed of this takeover leaves traditional automakers scrambling. BYD's 311% growth isn't just a headline, it's a warning shot. The European market is being carved up by new players who aren't weighed down by legacy costs, slow product cycles, or indecision. Every percentage point gained by these upstarts is another nail in the coffin for brands already teetering on the edge. The numbers don't lie. The future of Europe's car market is being decided right now, and the old giants are losing the fight. A family in Lyon stands in a dealership, staring at two cars that look nearly identical on paper. One wears a legendary European badge, the other a new logo from China. The difference? Nearly 9,000 euros less on the sticker for the BYD. Across Europe, that's become the new normal. Chinese brands are undercutting the old guard by up to 35%, and buyers are noticing. In Berlin, a former Volkswagen loyalist puts it bluntly, "I wanted to buy German, but why pay more for less range and fewer features? My neighbor just picked up an MG for the price of a used Golf." The old playbook, loyalty, heritage, a handshake at the dealer, doesn't work when wallets are squeezed. With living costs up and wages stagnant, the average European car buyer is making a hard pivot. Online sales channels now let shoppers compare prices in seconds, and the numbers aren't kind to the legacy brands. A family in Madrid can scroll through dozens of new electric vehicles from Chinese makers, all offering longer warranties and more tech for less money. Even the financing is easier. Many Chinese brands cut out the middleman, selling direct to consumers and skipping the traditional dealer markup. Dealers feel the squeeze too. With fewer test drives and shrinking margins, many are forced to slash prices just to move inventory. Some have started taking trade-ins on Chinese cars, a move unthinkable just 2 years ago. In Paris, a Renault dealer confesses, "It's a price war we can't win. I've lost 3 regulars to BYD this month alone." The numbers tell the story. For every 100 new electric cars sold in Europe, more than 11 now come from China. By 2026, that could be 1 in 4. The price gap isn't just a number, it's the wedge that's prying lifelong customers away from the brands they grew up with. For many buyers, the choice is simple. Pay 35% more for a fading legacy, or get more car for less money. The market is voting with its wallet, and the old giants are losing ground by the day. Carbon credit trading was supposed to be the lifeline for Europe's legacy car makers. For years, selling excess CO2 credits to rivals brought in easy money, money that kept the lights on when car sales sputtered. In 2023, the biggest players raked in over 1.2 billion euros just by selling these credits. That cash flowed straight to the bottom line, cushioning the blow from falling demand and rising costs. For brands like DS, Lancia, and even the parent giant Stellantis, these credits became as important as selling cars themselves. But 2025 delivered a brutal reality check. As more brands electrified their fleets to comply with tightening EU emissions rules, the pool of buyers for CO2 credits dried up almost overnight. The revenue that once reached 1.2 billion euros a year has collapsed to less than 450 million euros. That's not a slow leak. It's a sudden drop that leaves balance sheets exposed and cash reserves running thin. For some brands, this was the last reliable stream of income. Now, it's barely a trickle. The numbers don't lie. Stellantis's filings for the first half of 2025 show a double-digit revenue decline, with the loss of carbon pooling income hitting especially hard. Internal reports warn that the group's smaller brands, already struggling with falling sales, have lost their financial safety net. The credits that once paid for new model development, dealer support, and even payroll are gone. There's no replacement in sight. Euro 7 compliance costs are rising, but the lifeline that helped cover those bills has snapped. This isn't just an accounting headache. Without that steady stream of credit revenue, cash flow turns negative. The math is simple. More money going out for regulatory compliance, plant shutdowns, and restructuring. Less money coming in from every direction. For brands already teetering, the loss of CO2 credit income is the first domino. Suddenly, every euro counts. Miss a payment or run short on cash, and the banks start circling. The credit agencies take notice. Bond spreads widen. The clock starts ticking on debt maturities that once looked manageable, now looming like a storm on the horizon. The historic peak of 1.2 billion euros in credit sales once masked deeper problems. Now, with annualized revenue below 450 million euros, the truth is impossible to ignore. What looked like a healthy business was really a house of cards, propped up by a vanishing market for carbon offsets. As that market shrinks, so does the margin for error. For the weakest brands, the loss of this cash cushion is a financial cliff, one that comes with no warning and no safety net. The next step for many is to turn to outside lenders, but with shrinking revenues and mounting losses, the terms are only getting worse. The first domino has fallen, and the scramble for survival is about to get even more desperate. Banks and hedge funds once lined up to lend to Europe's car giants. Now, those same lenders have turned the screws, locking the industry into a trap that few saw coming. In the boardrooms of Paris, Milan, and Frankfurt, the mood is anxious, because the real crisis isn't just falling sales. It's the mountain of debt coming due in 2026. Over 6 billion euros in bonds will mature at once, most of it tied to strict covenants and sky-high interest rates. These aren't ordinary loans. They're loaded with fine print, trigger clauses that give creditors the right to seize assets or demand immediate repayment if certain profit or liquidity levels aren't met. With every missed sales target and every new wave of layoffs, those triggers inch closer. As the cash dries up, carmakers have been forced to accept desperate terms. In 2024 and 2025, U.S. hedge funds swooped in, offering emergency financing at double-digit rates. The catch? If margins or cash reserves fall below thresholds spelled out in the small print, control of key assets, factories, patents, even entire brands, can be handed over to lenders overnight. One restructuring expert, speaking off the record, called it a slow-motion foreclosure. The banks don't want to run car companies, but they'll take the factories if they have to. The biggest danger isn't just the size of the debt, it's the timing. With more than 6 billion euros due in a single 12-month window, and most brands burning through billions in cash each quarter, the risk of a mass default is real. Stellantis, for example, faces a liquidity crunch if current shipment declines and restructuring costs continue. Internal reports warn that, by mid-2026, the group could breach the minimum liquidity levels required by its lenders. That breach doesn't just mean a bad headline, it means creditors can call in their loans, force asset sales, or even push brands into bankruptcy. Credit rating agencies have already sounded the alarm. Moody's and S&P both slapped Stellantis with a negative outlook in July 2025, citing the looming debt wall and collapsing shipments. Bond markets have responded by driving up yields on 2026 notes, making refinancing even more expensive. Dealers and suppliers, already battered by factory closures and shrinking orders, now face the prospect of being left unpaid if a major brand goes under. This is the hidden hand accelerating the collapse. The so-called covenant triggers are silent until the numbers slip. Then they snap shut. As one auto analyst put it, it's not just the market killing these brands, it's the fine print in their loan agreements. The financial vice is tightening, and for Europe's weakest car makers, the next 12 months will decide who survives and who gets carved up by their creditors. The final chapter isn't being written in the showroom or the factory. It's playing out in the back rooms of banks and hedge funds, far from the workers and families who built these brands from the ground up. In June 2025, official EU data confirmed a 4.4% drop in new car registrations, evidence of a crisis accelerating faster than any expert forecast. Across Europe, factories tied to brands like DS, Lancia, and Jaguar have gone silent, while hundreds of dealerships shuttered their doors. What set this collapse apart wasn't just electric cars or shifting trends, but a perfect storm: harsh Euro 7 costs, a flood of Chinese imports undercutting prices by up to 35%, and a hidden liquidity cliff triggered by 6 billion euros in loans coming due in 2026. Still, not all financial agreements have been disclosed, and some internal brand negotiations remain sealed. What's clear is that these 9 legendary brands are vanishing due to decisions made behind closed doors, leaving workers, communities, and loyal customers to pay the price. The documents show this isn't a natural decline. It's a market erased by policy, foreign competition, and unchecked corporate deals. As history records the loss, the facts remain. Europe's car landscape is being redrawn at a pace and scale no one predicted.